Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Tuesday and the patch notes for patch 11.5 have been posted, which means it's time to cover the top 5 changes in this week's patch. We're going to be starting right off here with changes to Stridebreaker and Ginsu's Rageblade. I know it's technically 2 changes, but I'm bundling them into one because they're both fairly small but still worth talking about. With Stridebreaker here, the dash range is being increased and the dash speed is being slightly increased in exchange for a weaker slow and less damage. Now this initially just looks like an adjustment on the item from more of its damage into more of its sort of dash utility. But because the primary users of this item build it specifically for the dash, champions like Garen, Darius, and Set who don't have any mobility of their own, this does make a lot of sense as just being a straight net buff to the item and to these champions themselves, because the whole point of Stridebreaker is to open up these champions to actually be able to engage on units they otherwise wouldn't be able to get to. So it does make sense, and essentially this is going to be a net buff for those champions and a net buff for the item. Ginsu's Rageblade, meanwhile, is being changed to remove a powerful and unintended interaction between Rageblade and Senna. Because Senna's passive had no cap on critical strike chance, she could just constantly get more critical strike chance throughout the game. Ordinarily, this wouldn't be a big deal. It doesn't matter if you have 200% critical strike chance or 100%, like there's no fundamental mechanical difference between those two. But because of how Rageblade works, it meant that she would have infinitely stacking on-hit damage thanks to Rageblade, because it converts all of that critical strike chance into more damage. So to remove this, Riot have now capped off the critical strike chance that you can get from Rageblade, and thereby reducing the amount of free on-hit damage that you can get from the item at 100%. If you can hit 100% crit, you're still going to get max out on the damage, but you can't get any more than that. They've also changed Senna passive to convert any excess critical strike chance she has into lifesteal at the same rate. So this is going to be a removed interaction in the game. It's not going to exist anymore. You can still totally build Rageblade on Senna, but you're not going to have the infinitely scaling damage that you're used to. And speaking of bug fixes, let's go ahead and talk about Viego here. Now, Riot are removing a bunch of bugs. Technically, none of this is a balanced change to Viego, but this is still going to result in a net nerf to the champion because of how usable and or abusable these bug fixes can be. The first two don't really matter too much, though obviously Viego gaining extra range on a possession does matter quite a bit, but the second two are really the ones why I consider this to be a nerf. Viego not having a cast time on a soul possession is a huge deal. That cast time is intended to give bigger windows of recognizing, oh, Viego's taking that soul, he's going to have access to Camille Hookshot or Nasus Wither, how do I play around this, do I run, do I fight, that sort of a thing. Whereas if he's able to instantly possess a soul and then Camille Hookshot on top of you, there was no opportunity to react to that. So this is a big bug fix here, and the second, or the final one especially, is a big deal because he can no longer dodge turret shots that are in the air when he starts the possession animation. You know people are already using that to dodge tower shots in-game when they go for risky dives, so that definitely needed to be removed. These mechanics are now out of the game, so while a lot of players this isn't going to make any difference, for people who are really skilled at abusing bugs, they won't be able to abuse those anymore, and thereby Viego is slightly weaker than before, but I do still feel like he is very, very playable. Moving on to Seraphine. Now, Seraphine has been a very strong pick for some time now, especially in bot lane due to her ability to get a lot more damage for free out of her bonus notes. Now, Riot are essentially rebalancing the way her notes work. They now scale based on her ultimate rank, so level 6, 11, and 16 rather than per champion level. So technically it is a net buff overall, but it does mean that it's not a smooth transition of note damage. You do need to be hitting those very important level power spikes. In addition, her note damage has technically been buffed up, but now notes from allies only deal 25% damage of Seraphine's note damage. So that means that Seraphine is getting less value from ally notes than she did on the previous patch, and thereby she's getting significantly less value the more allies you're adding to the initial cast or the initial auto attack, because she's not getting as much damage per note as she was before. So it's going to be not as noticeable if it's just Seraphine on her own. Obviously it's a buff if it's just Seraphine on her own, and it's not going to be noticeable at all if it's Seraphine with just maybe one other ally. But the more allies you add past the first, the more you're going to notice the reduced damage you're going to get from notes. The other thing here is that Seraphine's ultimate cooldown has been increased by 20 seconds at rank 1. It makes sense given how impactful it is. It has a huge range, it has a pretty decent AoE, and the crowd control effect is very, very nice. So definitely makes sense that an impactful ultimate like this should be nerfed down to 3 minutes to really make it so that Seraphine has to think carefully about when and where she actually goes for the encore. Moving on to talk about Rell here. Now, this is worth talking about because Rell has been a dominant force in pro play for a long time, almost pick ban, due to how flexible her engage tools are and how solid she is in lane. Seraphine is really able to kind of sustain through lane while threatening engagements, and because of her ability to either do silly things like flash RE, or use her W, ER, or any of those various combos that Rell has at her disposal, it really makes her just sort of a powerhouse, especially in pro play where champions can abuse her ability to engage at long distances and while coordinated with a team. These changes here don't really affect her ability to engage, but they do open more windows of opportunity for players to punish Rell. Her base armor going down is going to make her more vulnerable to harass, especially auto-attack harass in lane, and a longer cooldown on her W form swaps widens the gap between your CC windows if she does go in with a W crash down in order to get some initial knockup, and then she's really hunting for that W to remount and then throw you to the side. Well, that's a much longer window between those two, which gives enemy champions more time to disengage. It also means that if she goes for a W and misses, she's going to get punished a lot harder because that's 2 extra seconds she has to wait before she can get back on her horse to try and run away with. So I do like both of these changes, but I don't think it'll move the needle very much on Seraphine or on Rell's pro play aspirations, because I do feel like she's still going to be just very, very solid. But either way, still good to see that at least she is in the patch notes this week. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about these crazy Pyke changes here. Now, mid lane Pyke is apparently still getting played somehow, which I don't get given how hard they've nerfed it in the past with the damage on the Q and then the E no longer affecting minions at all beyond the stun, but somehow it's still getting played, and that's circumventing the high risk, high reward playstyle that Pyke has as a champion. As a support, he's forced to rely on the extra gold generation he gets from his ultimate in order to make up sort of the windfall and let him accelerate into his lethality items. But consistent mid lane farm removes that essential payoff that he needs to get, and therefore makes him a lot too swingy, because if he's able to get mid lane farm and then gets a kill and gets the cash in, he's really, really ahead in gold now, whereas if he gets one as a support, it's essentially making up the gap and allowing Pyke to continue to be a champion. So this change here essentially is going to be trying to kick him out of the mid lane by reducing the amount of gray health he gets by a significant margin. This is down to 10% from 25% and no longer scales with champion level. So this is going to be stuck at 10% of damage taken, but now has a lethality scaling, so it's going to be more item dependent. The biggest thing here, though, is that it's increased to 35% of damage taken plus 50% lethality when 2 or more enemies are nearby. This means that a dual lane Pyke is actually getting more sustain in the early phases of the game than he would be normally, and it also means that this entire change is going to make him more dependent on gold and items in order to have that sustain that he's used to, as opposed to just getting champion levels and being able to sustain up that way. So I do really like this change. It is a buff if all you're doing is playing Pyke support. If you're playing mid lane Pyke, sorry, Riot really don't want you there, and you will likely have to find another pick instead. And that's going to be it for the changes for this week, guys. Let me know which change you're most excited for down in the comment section below, or which you think is the most impactful. I'm really looking forward to seeing how the Seraphine changes affect how she's able to work, but let me know what you guys want to see down in the comments. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days like today as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.